Welcome one, welcome all into yet another edition of Lions Central Radio. I am Nick Castora, my co-host Brandon Alisklu. We're once again joined on the show by Jeff Risdon to take a look at, an 0-5 start for Detroit, a really bad loss to the Cardinals. I mean, that's as understating it as I possibly can here. Lions dropped this one 42-17. Matthew Stafford benched in this one. Turnovers. We're going to ask a lot of questions to Jeff about this team and if they quit. Really, what's going on with the coaching staff? What should happen with the front office? Just a lot of overarching questions we'll get to with Jeff. And then later on in the show, we'll try and look forward. There is a game in Week 6, apparently. They're going to play the Bears. Aldo, barkeeper from the NFC North Barroom, will be joining us to talk a little bit about next week. But first, I toss to my co-host, Brandon.
Yeah, Nick, at a time like this, it's as I get older, I realize that you really need to show more gratitude and kind of take stock of the things you do have. Otherwise, you lose your mind because there's no way a winning season will be coming to Detroit this week. So in that spirit, I want to go ahead and thank our listeners, as always, for tuning in, for continuing to tell a friend, coworker, loved one, whatever it may be, to help us continue to grow the show. You are our marketing force, and we really appreciate it. And at lionscentralradio.com, we've been putting out our picks every week. I somehow am doing pretty well this year, Nick. You're there, and that's what counts. Mm-hmm. But we really, so folks, please go ahead and check that out every week. And as always, thank you so much for clicking through the Amazon banner on the website.
All right, Brandon, you go ahead and grab a drink of water. I'm going to try and get Jeff involved in the conversation here. We'll start, Jeff, with Matthew Stafford. Obviously, the biggest story coming out of this week was he was benched for Dan Orlovsky. No quarterback controversy or anything of that matter. Caldwell was quick to say that it was just a one-off thing in that regard. But did you think the benching was the right move for Detroit, and just kind of what is the right move with Stafford looking long-term?
Well, I think he certainly has to be the ongoing starter this year. I don't think there's any question about that. And I don't think there is any question about that within the organization with anybody. But yeah, he deserved to get yanked. He was awful. Now some of it was the fact that the defense pretty much knew what was coming once again, and that's a related but separate problem. When Corey Redding picked off that screen pass, there was no way that he didn't know what was coming. But at the same time, the underthrow to when he had Tim Wright open on the first interception. He just got baited into another one up the sideline there. He can't keep making these throws. And I was of the opinion up till about the beginning of last year, actually about the second or third game of last year, that he was a quarterback who hadn't earned the right to not get pulled yet. I look at it like baseball. Even if you're a great starter, some days you just don't have your best stuff. And unless you're at the very cream of the crop, you don't get that benefit of the doubt. If you're throwing 3 interceptions and a half, you probably deserve to sit down. And I think he did deserve to sit down in this one. I thought he was past that. Clearly he's not, because he's not getting any better. And one of the big cruxes for improvement for this year was heavily dependent on Matthew Stafford being better and this offense being better. And right now, neither of those has happened. And I'm not sure that he ever can get better, and certainly not get better in this particular offense. And that's a long-term issue and a short-term issue. And again, they're separate, but they're related. It looks like he's going to have to play this year out, and we'll get whatever we can out of him. Hopefully he rebounds to where he was last year, where he would be okay for most of the game and then turn it on at the end when they really needed it and get some quality wins. It would be nice to see this team respond with, and at least get back up to close to 500, get up to 6 or 7 wins by the end of the year. I think that's probably the best-case scenario. And that's only if Stafford improves a whole heck of a lot than what we've seen recently, because in that game, other than the first touchdown drive, he was awful.
Yeah, there was. I mean, you run out of words to describe how terrible that performance was. Obviously, when you have a 42-7 romp, as we did here last Sunday, these things are going to happen. But it's difficult to find anything to really take away from this game, especially Stafford's performance, except, okay, maybe at the beginning he had a couple throws, but that's it. And there were so many bad ones, as you talked about the Tim Wright one, where if he just lost that a little bit, Tim Wright, there's nobody behind him. I think it was Justin Rogers tweeted out a screenshot of it today, and it's infuriating to see that.
He's walking in for a touchdown if Stafford makes a throw that, Mark Sanchez can make that throw. Andy Dalton surely can make that throw. I think Ryan Fitzpatrick can make that throw, and Matthew Stafford is not making that throw, and that's incredibly frustrating.
Well, it's the throw you make in the backyard. It's where you're rolling out, and you're hoping the guy will come up just a bit, and you just kind of toss it over him. It's a keep-away throw. It's really not that difficult, but he made the only one he could in there. And it's going to cause us to wonder, yeah, he's going to start the rest of the season, and as he should, the team might as well see what they have in him, and maybe he can put enough games together to, well, what I mean is...
It's pretty clear what they have in him.
Well, I don't really know if it is, because if you continue to put these guys in positions where they can't play in offenses where it's not suited to their talents, it's difficult to really get any discern what he is or what he could be. Now, granted, I don't think that he's ever going to be a top 10 quarterback, but he is still one you can win with in the postseason if you put him in the right positions and if you surround him with the right team.
Yeah, I guess that's your opinion. I would disagree with it. One thing that when they touted what this offense was going to be, it was that Matthew Stafford couldn't turn the ball over as much, and that was the sacrifice being made in turn for cutting down on some of the longer range passes. And now what's most frustrating about his play is that the turnovers are still there, but then there's no explosiveness to the offense whatsoever. So I guess, Brandon, the thing is, how with this offensive game plan, and especially with offensive coordinator Joe Lombardi, it's every week the question is now being asked to Jim Caldwell: is he going to continue to make the play calls? Is he still the leader of this offense? And for now, Caldwell says yes. But at this pace, how long can this continue with Lombardi calling the plays?
I honestly don't think that anything will be done during the season unless it comes down from Mayhew. I don't think that Caldwell is going to back off at this point. And you put out the Barnwell's article. I think you shared it on our Facebook social media feeds, where it really broke down where Stafford's having the big issues and where his drop-off is, and it's those middle down the field throws in the middle of the field in his QBR for unfortunately that's the statistics they like to use there to throw everything off, but it dropped from 85.7 to 31.7, which is last in the league, and he also has 5 interceptions on just 42 attempts. And those are those plays. If you remember, that's where Golden Tate did all of his damage last year. He would catch it on that 13-yard drag, make a guy miss, and then he'd take off. Or, obviously there were the improbable bombs down the sideline against teams like New Orleans and whatnot. But this team it isn't finding its rhythm. And as Jeff said, Corey Redding knew the play. And I think Bruce Arians even said it, and Corey Redding said it. They knew what that play was for that pick. And also, you look at that last interception. Is that on Stafford? Is that on Calvin Johnson? It's hard to tell. But either way, the result is an interception. I guess, Jeff, turning to you on this one, the coaching obviously is a big problem, and the quarterback play is obviously a big problem. But do you see a huge issue with what Caldwell did in terms of if you throw another interception, you're going to get yanked?
No, I think that shows some fiery leadership, which I think is sorely missing on this team. I don't have a problem with him saying that, and as long as he sticks to his word, and he did. And I do think Matthew Stafford was caught very unaware by that. I think it was sort of like, you can really gonna pull me for Dan Orlovsky? I mean, that's as big of an insult as you can give to a starting quarterback in this league. I mean, seriously, I wish that there was some other thing that we could just push a button and solve this, but. I thought you said something good very earlier about fitting into the offense and how this offense is clearly not tailored to what he does well. And that brings into the long-term view of, okay, let's assume that changes will be made at the end of the year. I completely agree that nothing will be done during the year, with the possible exception of after the London trip and into the bye week, they might, if everything's still terrible, yank Lombardi out, but Caldwell's safe, Mayhew's safe. Sorry, folks, it's not going to happen in the season. That's just not the way the Fords roll. But when they bring a new offensive coordinator in next year, and perhaps a new head coach, is that going to be someone who can fit what Matthew Stafford does well, or is it going to be a case where he doesn't like what they have with Stafford, and then they try to do something else? That's one of the biggest questions that we have going forward that we're going to be answering for a long time between now and probably February. And man, it's very early to go thinking about this and being in the off season already. But what the heck? I've already put out 2 mock drafts. It's time to think about the draft and who we're going to get, man. You got to start working on, is Jared Goff the guy? Is Connor Cook the guy? Is Paxton Lynch from Memphis the guy? Will they fit the next offensive coordinator or head coach or both? And will Martin Mayhew be making these picks? There's so many things that are in the play now that we never dreamed we would be talking about in early October. It's maddening.
Well, yeah, and Jeff, that's where I wanted to go next was, say Detroit, and we don't know if they will, but say they are looking at the quarterback class and deciding if they need to draft a quarterback next year. Is Martin Mayhew and Tom Luan in this front office the guys you want in place to make that decision? If the season continues to go this far south, are they going to be the guys making that decision? One way leaning or another, what do you think? Should it be Mayhew? Will it be Mayhew?
I have defended Martin Mayhew for a long time. From the moment he was hired, I like Martin Mayhew. I think he's made some good decisions. I think he's made good strategies, but the strategies and the execution of those strategies haven't necessarily worked out. I love the investment in the offensive line, but for whatever reason, the players aren't working. For me, the biggest death kiss right now that's on Martin Mayhew is the fact that Kyle Van Noy was a healthy scratch Sunday for a team that desperately needs any defensive depth they can get. And also, Devin Taylor was inactive, and these are things that, these are the players that he's got to hit on those picks and those players, and they're not coming through either. So I tend to think that if they're going to make a coaching change, they're also going to make a general manager change. And no offense to Mr. Mayhew, but you got to do better than what you've done. You got to get better results in this. I mean, 2 playoff trips in 7 years, and also some very awful seasons. I mean, to me, this is more frustrating than the 2008 season because I knew they were going to be terrible that year. I thought this was a playoff team, and I thought this was a playoff team even going into the Denver game. And my God, man, I couldn't be more wrong. And somebody's got to pay.
Well, I've also been a person who stuck up for Mayhew a lot. People like to throw the 2012 or whichever draft that was. He doesn't have any of his players left. That stuff does happen, especially if you don't have a ton of picks. I know I've seen articles talking about how Bill Belichick has screwed up an entire draft before. These things happen. They're complete wild cards in a certain way. You do as much work as you can, and you make the best guess that you can. But the biggest thing to me is that your offensive coordinator is going to run his own running scheme. Now, we saw in the offseason Larry Warford said that Jim Washburn had told the offensive line that they were going to come off the ball this year, that they were going to attack the defense. That's clearly not what this team has been doing much of. They're still relying on that zone run. And why would you go ahead and draft a guard who isn't known for being very agile, for being able to handle that type of offense? So that is extremely odd to me. Obviously, the Kyle Van Noy pick. And, well, Nick, is there any picks in the last couple of years that have upset you?
No,
What a question.
Well, I think he's leading me into one in particular who wasn't on the field on Sunday about the Eric Ebron pick, which we've debated so heavily. I kind of want to go back just to this game, and I'll just avoid that, Brandon. Let's talk about just a little bit more about this game in particular.
Good duck.
And Jeff, one thing that an overreaching question of this was, did the entire team quit in this game? Did some players quit? Just from body language and what you could tell from these guys, did you think that the Lions quit on Sunday?
I do, and I really hate to say that, but it was obvious on Golden Tate's face and body language very early that he was done. He wanted to be anywhere but there. And there were a few guys. I thought Theo Riddick played hard. I thought Corey Fuller actually showed a little something. I thought that Travis Swanson just wasn't very good, but he was playing hard. But by and large, I mean, the defense was clearly just going through the motions down the stretch. They just wanted to get off the field. And side note, that game took forever. Why weren't they running the ball to get out and end our misery? That game lasted way too long. It was like 40 minutes longer than the correlating game that was on the other network. It was just stupid that we had to be tortured that long watching our sorry team not give full effort in a blowout loss was, man. There was a lot of quitting. I don't really think the coaching staff had many answers. I think they were ready to go home, go to the showers. It was bad.
Brandon, just a quick note before you transition us. I got sick of watching the Lions in the second half, so I flipped to the red zone. But as Jeff was saying, it was the game took so long that the Red Zone channel it only had the Lions game left from the 4 o'clock slate, so it had to show almost the whole fourth quarter of that sorry Lions game, and it was the Red Zone channel is supposed to be all the excitement, and it's showing Dan Orlovsky and the Lions trying to drive the field in the fourth quarter, so the Red Zone channel got it pretty bad as well.
Well, and out of all of that, and I think this is maybe just sour grapes on my part or a little bit of bitterness. I mean, on one side, actually, on a good note, I was able to have my post-game article pretty much written and edited before the final whistle. It was ready to go.
These are the small victories we all look for.
Exactly. It's like, well, now I can have dinner on time. This is great. But on the other side of that is, if you're going to throw 70 passes, Dan Orlovsky threw 38 passes in this game. It didn't come in until the third quarter when the game was, 35-7, maybe 42? I don't even know at this point. If you're going to throw that many passes, do not kick a field goal when you're down to 35-7. I don't understand that at all. If you're going to throw the ball around and at least make it look like you're trying to come back, why are you kicking the field goal? Not that there's, even if you're running the ball, I don't care. I don't see the reason for kicking the field goal, but I don't know how he could have possibly explained that one to where I would have been satisfied with the answer.
And not just that, but we got on him last week, or maybe it was the week prior, about you're in it was against Denver. They're in the 2-minute drill, and they continue to throw dink and dunk underneath passes when they're supposed to be really trying to drive the ball and get down the field quickly. And yet here they are down 35-7, and you see Theo Riddick with another 10 catches for 53 yards. It's because they keep throwing 3-yard underneath routes, even if it's 3rd and 10, 3rd and 12, whatever, what have you. It's just the offense doesn't evolve or change whatsoever. You continue to see the same underneath routes when there's no place for them in a game where they're down, whatever it was, 35-7, as you said. And I don't know what else to say about this game, Brandon.
Well, I mean, I can say this. As far as Theo Riddick, he's a great fantasy pickup. I've started him the last 2 weeks, and it's worked out very well for me. PPR, obviously. But, so, there are some bright spots. You can't overlook those. But I was trying to think before this, and if anybody has an answer, feel free to shout it out or tweet us or anything. Is there any precedent for it? And I know it's been a very popular opinion for almost 2 years now, but for a coordinator becoming the head coach when the rest of the front office and coaching staff was cleaned out. I cannot think of a single instance where that has happened. And is Terrell Austin the right guy for the job anyways? Jeff, do you remember that? And do you see any way that these guys keep their jobs other than Terrell Austin?
No, and I don't think Austin will be back. I've heard from a mutual friend of ours that he's very interested in moving down to the college level where he'll have more stability because he sees, what's going on. He knows the writing's on the wall already. I've been here for 2 years. Now I got to find another job. If you go to college and are successful, you can last a lot longer than that. And I think I don't quote me on that, but that's what I've heard that he's leaning towards. So I don't think he's a head coaching candidate. I can't think of any time that it's been that way. Although the name Wade Phillips sticks in my head, I think he might have leached in somewhere and done that. But I can't think of any other real times for it. And to be honest, the defensive scheme has not been all that great this year. Yeah, they've been hamstrung with injuries, and the defensive line right now. I mean, man, they signed Ismaili Kitchen, and he almost had to play, and he was in a kitchen off the street. So there's a serious lack of depth on the front. But at the same time, they didn't play Devin Taylor. They're still giving way too much cushion on those seam routes and crossing routes over the middle. Stephen Tulloch in coverage.
It's hard. It's hard to watch.
How do you put him in that role? That's setting your players up to fail. We generally love Terrell Austin as a fan base, but he's not having a good season either. And I think a lot of people are overlooking that based on the sheer magic that he had last year. I think we've seen Rasheed Mathis age finally, unfortunately, and for whatever reason, Darius Slay is big play Slay, but it's going the wrong direction on most of those big plays this year. So, I wouldn't be upset if they fired everybody at the end of the year. And quite honestly, I don't want to see this team get hot, finish 6-10 by winning 6 of its last 8 games, and people keeping their jobs. That's counterproductive. And I really hope that the Ford family, Mrs. Ford, who's apparently running the
at 90 years old, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I hope that she sees it that way. I really hope Tom LeWand goes. I don't like him personally, but I also don't think he's done a very good job. I think it's time that you have to evaluate Calvin Johnson's contract and future with this team. Is he going to be part of this team when it's good again? When he's costing $46 million in cap room over the next 2 years? Or is there another team that maybe would want to take that off your hands and free you up to do a lot of different things? These are all things we got to look at going forward, guys. Topics for future shows.
Well, Jeff, this is why we bring you on. You are spot on with Wade Phillips. I don't know how you pulled that one out, but Dan Reeves was fired in 1993, or was it? Yeah, 1993 or 1994. I can't tell here now. It just screwed up. And then he was succeeded by his protege, Wade Phillips. Well done.
Yeah. Blind squirrel.
Yeah, well, and as you were saying with the front office, I think it's fair to question whether Tom LeWand should have ever was qualified for that job in the first place. But as you said, we can get into that other shows. One thing to get you out of here, Jeff. DeAndre Levy, it was supposed to be a bright spot. He was returning in this game. We only saw him for a handful of plays at best. Is the right move for Levy just to sit him for the rest of a lost season?
I wouldn't be opposed to that. Now, if they're still trying to win games and salvage and maybe catch the Bears and not finish in last place to get some moral victory out of it, or if they're intent on keeping the staff intact, yeah, we've got to see how he fits in the defense. But other than that, he's clearly not right. He definitely wasn't right when he was on the field, and now he's aggravated. Yeah, shut him down again. I think they made a critical error in not putting him on the IR designated to return. I think that's yet another mistake that you can put on Martin Mayhew and staff this year. It's really hard to defend those guys. And honest to God, I really do like and respect Martin Mayhew quite a bit. I think he's a very good football mind, and I think he's a good guy. But he just hasn't gotten the job done. And, like I said earlier, you know what? The pitchforks are out, man. Somebody's got to pay.
Yeah, and it's reality of being anything in the NFL. You have to produce results, or you're going to be taken off either the field like Stafford, or you'll be kicked out of the front office like Mayhew. And as far as DeAndre Levy, he did play 17 plays this game, which of course is 17 more than any of the previous 4 games. He didn't record a single thing as far as the stat sheet is concerned. At least according to Pro Football Focus.
And Kyle Van Noy played too, and that's really frustrating that Kyle Van Noy can't get on the field. Josh Bynes, to his credit, is playing well, and apparently he stepped up as a leader in the locker room, which is very surprising and very disturbing that it takes a journeyman backup linebacker to be the leader of your team. There's
pretty
another
telling.
indictment. It just keeps going. Vicious circle.
It really does. And Jeff, we're going to go ahead and cut you off right now and can this so that we have more of you throughout the rest of the season that do the off season, because otherwise we're just going to burn through all the topics we'll be talking about soon enough. So we really appreciate you for coming on.
Anytime you want to have the funeral on this season and the rebirth for next year, I'm free.
All right, perfect. We will definitely be bringing you back for that. Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks, Jeff.
Well, Nick, I guess at this point it's a good time to kind of hit the last few talking points on this game. As always, we do our game MVPs and our most disappointing. I see for the game MVP, I'm not familiar with this player.
No, yeah. So over the last couple of weeks, I've been really strained and really upset even having to pick MVPs through some of these slogs. But I mean, I just refused this week. There was no most valuable player when a team plays this bad and was this atrocious. I mean, I looked at it at the stat sheet just trying to weasel someone out, and I guess Sam Martin had a pretty good day punting. He did plenty of that. But outside of that, I'm not going to say someone was valuable to this team that did so bad.
Well, I do a stock report thing every week, and I think
Sam Martin's stock is through the roof.
He actually had a very good game. TJ Jones had some nice returns.
Plenty of opportunities for that.
I think three. So I think 2 of his returns, a 40-something yarder, the one that went down to the 27-yard line of Arizona, that was wiped out by a holding penalty, brought it back to Detroit 30. Yeah, he had a 10-yard punt return later to get Detroit the ball on their own 40, which of course wiped out by a Don Carey holding penalty. I believe Brandon Copeland was the culprit on the first one, and there were also 2 fair catches that the team was penalized on.
Plenty of practice.
I don't understand that one at all. But those 2 guys did at least have a couple plays. Jason Jones in particular had a great stunt to give Ziggy Ansah, who is now we got to get these guys drunk if they're going to listen to this whole show, who is now still the co-leader in sacks for the NFL. So hey, there's something nice to hold on to for this season. As for my
defense
game
has
MVP,
been out there enough, that's for sure.
Yeah, very true. And as for my game MVP, you got to show the fullback a little love every now and then. I thought Burton played a nice game. He had some good backside seals, and that catch when he shook Alex Okafor, I think, to pick up I don't think he quite picked up the first down, but he had a gain of 9. So yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah, I think the more interesting topic and the one more people might be interested in is the most disappointing because there's such a bevy of players to choose from here. Stafford was the obvious one, but we talked about his benching at length already with Jeff. Let's talk about Golden Tate a little bit. And his post-game comments obviously frustrated a lot of this fan base, and people are upset. They're angry. He already retracted a lot of it. His play on the field, first of all, his demeanor, as Jeff said, he was someone you could tell physically his body language was he just didn't care to be there after a certain point. He had one fumble where he practically handed the ball to a defender. He just didn't look very interested in this game. And then post-game he goes and says, how do you guys boo us? You don't understand what we're going through, and yada, yada, some things we've heard from others before. It's just frustrating to hear it for a fan base that's dealing with an 0-5 season at this point. So there's a whole mess of reasons why I'm going with him, but Golden Tate is the answer for me.
Well, with Golden Tate's comments, it reminded me a lot of my girlfriend and I occasionally, and I'm sure this happens with every couple out there, you say something or you do something and a meaning or an intention that you didn't mean or intend is put into that. You did that to, whatever. Like, no, I actually just wanted some water, but that's cool. Whatever. So with Tate, I was thinking, no, we weren't turning our back on the Lions. At least the fan base wasn't. They were just watching where the ball was.
Right.
There weren't any Lions near it. So it's not, it's just physics. It's nothing personal. For me, I decided to go with Amir Abdullah. For obvious reasons, the 2 fumbles, I didn't think this was going to necessarily be a problem because he did show a lot better ball security towards the second half of his college career, but it definitely reared its ugly head in this game. He did not see the field again, I believe. I'm pretty sure there wasn't a single snap for him after the botched kickoff returns. So, and Detroit was extremely lucky to hold on to that ball, and there was also the other fumble, of course, on his when Detroit was actually driving. It's one thing you forget about this game. Detroit was moving the ball to start the game. They were actually picking up first downs and then turnover.
They were winning at the end of the first quarter. They were winning this game.
Yeah, what was it, the first time? And I think over 200 minutes of game time since San Diego that Detroit had a lead. And it was, act as if you've been there before, tough because you haven't yet. And they immediately throw up all over themselves and hand the ball over 6 times. Let's just move on.
Well, and just with Abdul, since that electric, his first carry against San Diego, he just hasn't had any, really any standout runs. His longest one in this game was only 5 yards. And when we've documented plenty of the offensive line's woes, and Zach Zenner ends up getting 10 carries for 30 yards. His longest was 12, so that tells you what the other 9 looked like. We'll try and move on. We'll give you the injury updates we did already on DeAndre Levy. We'll see what happens with him. Obviously, the team is always tight-lipped on what his status is moving forward. Joik Bell says that he will be back this week. Hopefully it's the Joik Bell that we know and love from years prior and not the one that we saw in the first couple games of this year because, that Joik Bell isn't going to help anyone.
Well, there's a whole lot of vomit talk going on this podcast, and I don't really blame either of us. And right now we're going to go ahead and take a quick break, and then we're going to welcome in Aldo Gandia of NFCBarroom.com.
Oh, I was wondering if you were going to try and pronounce his name.
Yeah, I figured what the hell.
All right.
Because if I screw it up, nobody's going to be surprised.
Yeah, well, when I introed at the top and mentioned he was going to be on, I just said Aldo from NFCBarroom.com. I didn't even try his last name. All right, let's send him a link. Now I didn't.
Gandia probably.
Yeah, right. I didn't stop the broadcast, so did you mark where to cut?
Yeah, I got it.
Okay. Let's send him an invite. Did you give him a general time that he'd be coming on?
Yeah, quarter after, so he should be.
Yeah, we're right about on cue for that. Aldo Gandia at Gmail. Let's see, Aldo. Let's see what you got.
It says he used to be a reporter.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well.
Something just popped up on my thing. What was that? Oh, probably just the invite sent.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know what happened at the beginning. It's one of those points where you have so many notes. It's like, shit,
Yeah.
should have trimmed this. Getting a little wayward.
Yeah.
Fine.
I mean, with Jeff, it's going to go where it goes. He's real good at actually getting us back on track. Sometimes he's just an ideal interview for this.
Yeah. And plus, it's just a conversation. Let it fucking go.
Yeah,
Wherever
that's
it goes,
exactly
it goes.
right. Are we jumping right to Chicago with Aldo then? That's what we have right on the dock with him.
Well, let's get his quick take on. I think we have it in there.
Oh, okay, yeah, right after.
Aldo's thoughts on.
Yep.
Wonder if he knows how to use this.
Well, he has a Google Plus account, so for what that's worth.
I don't want to put Twitter.
Okay. These Hangouts are the only time I'm ever on Google Hangout or Google Plus. I can tell you that.
Yeah, no shit. I mean, I use the G chat occasionally, but that's about it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. When I'm on email or whatever, but I'm never on Google Plus.
Yeah, no shit. I heard they might scrap it, but I wonder what they would do with all that.
Huh.
Hello there.
Oh, there we go. Right.
Aldo.
What's up, Aldo?
Hey guys, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. How do we say the last name? I'm pretty sure I just screwed it up, even though I really tried.
That's fine. It's Gandia.
Gandia.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a Spanish name.
All right. Well, Nick, I'll let you do it this time.
So, Aldo, I'm gonna intro us back into the show. I'm gonna ask for some overall thoughts on kind of the Lions to this point on Stafford, Lombardi, and company, and then we'll kind of try and get into a little preview of the Bears matchup.
Sounds good.
All right.
Perfect.
All right. I'll segue us back in here, Brandon.
All right, just give me like 5 seconds of silence so I know where the cut is.
Okay. We're now joined on the show by Aldo Gandia. He's on Twitter at AldoBarkeeper, NFCBarroom.com. And Aldo, we were just talking to Jeff Risdon on the topic, and kind of with an 0-5 team, overall thoughts are what you really have to give. And first time having you on, we appreciate you coming on. And I'd like to start with what you think of this Lions team to this point. Stafford, Lombardi, Caldwell. The floor is yours on what you've seen from the Lions to this point.
Well, first of all, and I sincerely mean this, my heart goes out to all the Lions fans. I know how difficult this is to go through. Everybody puts their heart and soul into their football team. There's 16 games in a season, and when you see a performance like you guys have for the first 5 games of the season, it's devastating. And I've been listening to your show over the last few weeks and following.
We appreciate that.
Fans. You bet. And following Detroit fans on Twitter and so forth, and so I know the heartbreak you guys are going through. So hang in there. What I've seen from the Lions is a team in total disarray, and it's what I like to talk about, this kind of snowball effect where something goes wrong, it's a little snowball, and then something else goes wrong, and all of a sudden the snowball gets bigger and bigger, and all of a sudden you got this gigantic boulder going down a cliff, and everything just goes wrong. And that's what happened in the second half of Game 1 against the Chargers, when Chargers scored 30 unanswered points, and then things just started to go downhill for this franchise. And I think Coach Caldwell did a terrible thing at the Seattle game when he handled the call by the back judge incorrectly. He should have been irate. He should have used that to galvanize his troops and say, let's put a chip on our shoulder, let's go out there and kick butt. But he basically told everybody to be quiet about it, and as opposed to, using the emotion of us versus them, he didn't handle that right. And on top of that, he's just not handled the Joe Lombardi situation correctly. Lombardi is not doing a good job of using the talent that he has around him. He is forcing the team to work by his system. And I don't know if you guys have already talked about this Washington Post article written by Mike Rainier today.
No, we have not.
Okay, this is really a fantastic article. I urge you and all your listeners to read this thing. Let me quote you a little bit from what Mike Rainier writes in the Washington Post. He says that Stafford is throwing on 73% of his snaps, which is a record pace. He's being hit 38.8% of his dropbacks, and that's by far
Quite the combo.
of his career. And you guys know better than me that when Stafford is under pressure, he becomes reckless and he starts to panic like all quarterbacks do, and so he's not responding well to that. Renner goes on to write, "It should surprise no one that he's on pace, he being Stafford, is on pace for career lows and by drastic margins in play action rate, 16%, average depth of targets, 6.5 yards, and deep passing rate, 6.2% of attempts. That last figure is the lowest rate of any quarterback in the league. So if opposing defenders are jumping routes and calling out routes, it's because they have no fear of getting beat over the top. And that's Joe Lombardi's fault, and it's also Jim Caldwell's fault for not addressing that with Lombardi. My prediction is that Joe Lombardi will be out of work on November 1st. It will be announced on November 2nd. He has to go. Caldwell doesn't want to do it. He's not that type of guy, but this is a sinking ship with Joe Lombardi calling the plays for that team. And the other prediction I have on that matter is that Jay Glazer will probably break the story in about 20 minutes.
One more note on what you had said about Stafford's throwing. The number I saw in an article on Grantland by Bill Barnwell was that he's averaging currently 6.12 yards per attempt, which is 32nd among guys this year. Phillip Rivers, Tony Romo, and Alex Smith were the only ones averaging fewer yards per attempt, whereas last year Stafford was at 7.8 and the league average was 8.12. So it is a drastic drop from what we've seen in the past from Stafford.
Yeah, and I got to tell you guys that the problem with Stafford, and I see all these comments, and there's some defenders of his among the Detroit Lions fans, and I would be in that group if I was a Lions fan, because the problem is that he needs to find a coach that suits him well. We're seeing this in Chicago now that it looks like Jay Cutler has finally got a coach that they're simpatico and things are working well between them. Stafford needs a guy like Adam Goss, and Derek Mack on our website today wrote a story of on the Lions and talked about whether the team should tank or not, and that's kind of a strong word, but basically he was saying the Lions should just start playing some of their younger players and prepare for 2016, and then also start interviewing coaches like Adam Goss. Goss would be tremendous for Stafford. He's just such a good quarterback. He works with the talent at hand. He doesn't force a system on somebody, and that's what Stafford needs in order to get back on track. Because let's face it, I don't think there's a quarterback out there in college that's coming out that doesn't need at least 2 or 3 years to become a good NFL quarterback. And I think you guys have one now. It's just about getting him the protection he needs and getting him the scheme that works well for his talents.
I couldn't agree more with that point. There was one particular stat that I forgot to bring up earlier, which I'm sure Nick is going to love, but it's adjusted yards per pass attempt, and it's among all active players right now. It's a formula that uses passing yards, passing touchdowns, interceptions, and obviously passes attempted. And Stafford comes in at 6.52, Eli Manning 6.57, and Flacco 6.65. These are guys that have won Super Bowls. So I will stick with that. If you put the right team around these guys and put them in the right spots, they can win you games. They can win you championships. They will not be the ones that take a beaten-up team like Aaron Rodgers 4 or 5 years ago and drag you to a Super Bowl. But they can be positive cogs in an offense and in a team that is successful. We appreciate all the talk on the Lions. You really did hit a lot of good points there, and that article we'll be sure to find and share on our social media for the show. But we want to go ahead and transition now to the Chicago Bears. We see they were supposed to be the team that was the laughingstock. They were selling off players at the beginning of the season. John Bostic and my mind slips on the other guy that was shipped away, Jared Allen for a pair of 6th-round picks. So now they've reeled off 2 straight wins and one in Arrowhead. Is this team better than anticipated, or do those 2 wins have more to do with the competition?
Well, I think it's certainly partly the competition. I still see the Bears as a 5 to 7 win team this season. You know, their first victory was at home against the Raiders, and people forget that the Raiders were a 1-9 on the road for the last 10 games, and in their last 25 road games, there were 3-22. So the fact that it took the Bears a last-minute victory to win the game is probably what we should all be kind of questioning as opposed to the win. And as for the Chiefs, that was a big victory at Arrowhead. But if you saw the game when Jamal Charles went down with about 9 minutes to go in the third quarter, that arena just went deafening quiet, and the mood on the sideline, it was obvious that they had lost their key star player, the player that entire offense revolves around. So defensively, the players started to sag their shoulders. Offensively, they were relying on Alex Smith, who is truly one of the worst quarterbacks in the NFL. And so the Bears took advantage of that. So the Bears are not a bad team. Here's the one thing that's the biggest difference between the Chicago Bears and the Detroit Lions: coaching. The Bears have a really good staff. John Fox is not a genius by any means, but he's a good delegator. He's got an excellent offensive coordinator in Adam Goss. The defensive coordinator came from San Francisco, Vic Fangio. He switched over the defense into a 3-4 scheme. It's an attacking defense. And these guys are making do with a roster that is much worse than the Lions roster, but they're getting more out of these guys. You know, after the first game of the season when the Bears lost to the Packers, there was a confidence in that Bears dressing room because they saw the difference between the Trestman coach team and a Fox coach team, and they saw hope, and they saw progress, and they saw how there wasn't any quit. And so what we're seeing with the Lions, unfortunately, is a team that's on the verge of quitting if they haven't already. So kudos to new Bears general manager Ryan Pace for bringing in probably an A-plus coaching staff. Excellent teachers, excellent motivators, know how to work with the talent they have around them.
And yeah, Aldo, looking at the Bears, and you mentioned they don't have quite the talent that Detroit does. And through a couple of weeks now, Alshon Jeffrey hasn't been on the field, so there's one of their best players who hasn't been out there. And with Chicago winning their last two, who is playing at the highest level for Chicago right now? Who's leading the charge for them?
Well, on offense, you know, Jay Cutler is playing with a confidence that we haven't seen in a couple of years, and Matt Forte is leading the NFL in rushing, and the big reason why he's leading the league in rushing is Peterson had his bye last week, but the fact that he's number one is a testament to how well he's playing from the running back position. Martellus Bennett had a poor week in Kansas City, but he's still having a good season, and he's somebody that the Lions are going to have to account for. And the two young wide receivers who have stepped up in the absence of the injured Alshon Jeffrey and Eddie Royal, Marquise Wilson and Cameron Meredith, a kid out of Illinois State, a rookie, both of them played really well in Kansas City, and there's a lot of talk here about how Cutler is making, you know, these wide receivers play better, and he's finally learned how to make wide receivers better. Well, you know, I don't know about that, but I think a lot of it has to do with just a different offensive scheme. And I think people forget that Jay Cutler had a 35-23 record when Coach Lovie Smith was in charge of the team, and that team was built on defense and running, and that's sort of what the Bears are rebuilding now. On defense, the Lions have to really keep their eye on Pernell McPhee. He was the prized free agent acquisition who was signed from the Ravens. He was a specialty pass rusher with the Ravens, and now with the Bears, he's been kind of handled the team leader responsibilities on defense, and the guy has really impressed. He had, right after the play that Jamal Charles went down, he blocked a field goal. He had a couple of sacks, and the way he leads the team on defense just gets them fired up, and so he's somebody the Lions will have to keep an eye on. Additionally, the linebacker play on the outside has been good. with Sam Acho and McPhee, and the defensive line play with guys like journeymen like Theo Ratliff and Jarvis Jenkins are guys that the Lions are going to have to account for.
Right on, Aldo, and that's there are some decent guys playing well for Chicago right now. You brought up McPhee, and you brought up those wide receivers who are kind of stepping up. For me, the biggest advantage that Chicago has coming into this game, and it's another thing you kind of touched on as far as their coaching, is at least that team has an identity. On offense, they're going to run the ball. Matt Forte is leading the league in rushing, and it's not like they had Jimmy Clausen back there, so defenses didn't have to really respect the passing game too much. Yet he's still finding some success, which is something Detroit could take a few lessons from. So to me, that is the biggest advantage for Chicago heading into this game. What do you see as Chicago's biggest advantage heading into Sunday?
Well, the fact that they're playing with confidence and the Lions are not, that's the biggest advantage. The fact that I trust the Chicago coaching staff more than the Lions coaching staff to come up with a game plan that's going to exploit the weaknesses of the other team. I think another big advantage is, again, Pernell McPhee. If this offensive line doesn't show up to play and Lombardi doesn't come up with a scheme to stop him, McPhee is good for a couple of sacks, and he's just going to terrorize Stafford up and down that field. So that to me is the biggest advantage. I think that the Lions have some advantages coming into this game, and that's their defense. I mean, this Bears offense is still a work in progress, and I know that this Lions defense is capable of playing much better than they have, and they've shown signs of it. I mean, they're not losing because of the defense outside of that first game. And so they should be able to control the line of scrimmage. The Chicago Bears have some offensive line problems. You guys think you guys have some offensive line problems. We've got some offensive line problems here in Chicago that will make you guys really happy with what you got. We've got a rookie center, Hernos Grasu, who's been muscled around his second series against Kansas City. Dontari Poe just pushed him out of the way and sacked Cutler in the end zone for a touchdown, caused a fumble and got a touchdown. They've moved the all-pro guard Kyle Long over to right tackle. He's still getting acclimated to that position. We've got a right guard named Vladimir Dukas, who is just not trustworthy. I mean, I trust Vladimir Putin more than I trust Vladimir Dukas. Mm-hmm. And over on the left side of the line, we've got Jermon Bushrod, who's recovering from a concussion, so he may not play. His replacement, Charles Leno, played last week, and I think Pro Football Focus gave him one of the worst grades of the week at the tackle position. So the Bears' offensive line is in a shambles, and the Lions should be able to take advantage of that, especially in that venue.
Well, and Aldo, the whole country got to see Detroit obviously 2 weeks in a row, but against Seattle, that was one of the things that Detroit did actually have going well, was they were getting to Russell Wilson, and Seattle was a team that, much like Chicago, has a lackluster offensive line. So is that kind of something you would expect to see in this matchup from Detroit, assuming that the team, which we did see quit quite a bit against Arizona, assuming they do show up at least, should the defensive line be able to get to Jay Cutler early and often?
They should, without a doubt, and I think that the Bears are going to have some difficulty in keeping Cutler upright. I think one of the things that you're definitely going to see is the offensive line having trouble in that arena. If the fans show up ready to help this team win and make the noise, you're going to see easily Charles Leno and Vladimir Dukas jump off sides 2 or 3 times, and then things can snowball quickly in that arena if the Lions take advantage of this awful offensive line. So if Terrell Austin, you guys tell me, does he like to blitz a lot? Because that would be, for me, something that I would recommend they do.
Yeah, you can bet that Detroit's definitely going to be bringing a lot of blitzes to attack that Chicago offensive line. Anytime Vlad Dukas is on the field, that's something you target with impunity. And also, the biggest advantage to Detroit for Detroit for me, as far as heading in this game, and it's kind of weak, but it needs to be said that it's home field and it's desperation. This team has to do something. Their backs are against the wall, all of that bullcrap that they're going to try to fill headlines with. It should have somewhat of an actual advantage for this team. And that's why in the end we usually do we finish our show with a bold prediction and a game prediction. And I'll give mine, Aldo, before asking you for yours. But that's why I'm actually predicting a win. That is my bold prediction for this week. I dare not go much further with this team because, well, I don't trust them. But I don't know that Chicago is that good. This game is in Ford Field. Chicago hasn't won there in quite a while now. So I'm going to just go ahead and say Detroit 24-14. Aldo, how do you see this one shaking out?
Well, and I wish I could say the Lions were going to win. That way some of your listeners would say, hey, this guy sounds cool. I'm going to go over and check out his website. But here's why I think the Bears are going to win, and I think it just gets back to confidence. I think you've got a team coming into Ford Field that has confidence, and I think they're playing against a team that right now it just looks like, they might be cashing in their chips. And so unless Jim Caldwell can get this team fired up, and unless that crowd is into the game, I think the Bears are going to win a squeaker. They've won 2 squeakers in a row. I see a Robbie Gould field goal winning this thing 24-21, something like that. But it's going to be close. And if the Lions win, I will not be surprised. But right now, I'm concerned with the Lions' lack of confidence.
Yeah, and Brendan, the issue I take with the advantage for Detroit being home field in desperation is that they just had that, and they didn't show up against Arizona. They came out flat, and and based on what we've seen from them, I don't have a reason to think suddenly the switch flips and they do show up and bring it against Chicago. So a much weaker opponent in Chicago, but Detroit isn't a team where you say they're going to for sure show up and come to play. Give me Chicago 21-17 in this one as well. If I have to do a bold prediction, I think Detroit does finally get off the turnovers, and especially Amir Abdullah, who's going to protect the rock with everything he has after giving up 2 last week. But yeah, like Aldo said, it's going to be Chicago. I've got them 21-17. Once more, Aldo, it's at Aldo Barkeeper on Twitter. And then can you tell us just real quick a little bit about the website that you have as well?
Yeah, thanks. NFC North Barroom focuses on the 4 NFC North teams. We write articles about the Packers, Lions, Bears, Vikings, and beer. And so we try to create a virtual barroom experience. We also do movie reviews, the type of stuff that you talk about when you go to the bar to have a few beers with the guys. It's in its infancy. It's a year old. We've got about 5 staff writers covering the teams, and stop by and take a look at some of the funny stuff that we have. We've got a guy named Benny Slacks who writes this really dirty, filthy column about the Bears every Monday. We've got Derek Mack writing about the Detroit Lions in a really good journalistic style. The piece he's got up now. About whether the Lions should, for lack of a better word, tank the rest of the season and prepare for 2016. I think it'll be an interesting read for readers. And we've got a bunch of other fun stuff on there. So stop on by, give us your thoughts. And guys, I really appreciate being on your show. I'm a loyal listener to your podcast. I think you guys do a great job, and hang in there. I know this is a tough go for you guys.
Yeah, and folks, we do have a couple links to some articles from Aldo's site, so please do check that out on our Facebook and Twitter. And once again, Aldo, thank you so much for stopping by and joining us on the show.
Take care, fellas.
Well, and a big thank you to our guests, and folks, again, a big thank you to you folks for listening each and every week and telling people about the show. Again, you guys are our marketing force. If there's anything you'd like us to discuss on the show or just anything you want to talk about in general, go ahead and find the show on Facebook, Lions Central Radio. You can find the show on Twitter, at Lions Central PFC. You can find me on Twitter, at Brandon Alistoglu. That's ALISOGLU. And you can find Nick Kostora at Nick Kostora, KOSTORA.
Folks, we appreciate you sticking with us throughout a tumultuous season to this point. We're still coming at you each and every week. Hopefully it's a little bit more optimistic and brighter, hopefully after a Lions win. I'm not predicting it, though. Until we talk post-Chicago game, for Brandon Alistoglu, I am Nick Kostora. Thank you so much for tuning in to Lions Central Radio.